Antarctica, the vast icy continent at the southernmost tip of the Earth, is often thought of as an isolated, unchanging place, locked away in frozen stasis. However, recent scientific observations reveal a shocking truth: Antarctica is shifting. Not just a little bit, but in ways that could change the course of the planet's future. This shifting is not limited to the slow, steady movement of ice sheets. What we're witnessing is something much more dramatic. The continent, once considered a stable, unchanging part of Earth's natural system, is now showing signs of instability that could have far-reaching consequences for every corner of the globe. The first clue to this unsettling reality came with the discovery that parts of Antarctica's massive ice sheets are retreating faster than anyone ever expected. This is not just a few miles of ice melting at the edges, but entire glaciers that have been in place for millennia, retreating at speeds never before seen. In 2017, a research team uncovered something that would send shockwaves through the scientific community. The Thwaites Glacier, located in West Antarctica, was melting much faster than anticipated, and its retreat was accelerating. Thwaites is often referred to as the Doomsday Glacier for a reason. Its potential collapse could raise sea levels by more than 10 feet, which might not sound like much at first, but the consequences would be catastrophic. Major cities like New York, Miami, and even parts of London could be submerged, displacing millions of people, causing untold destruction to coastal infrastructure, and displacing entire populations. But how did this happen? What caused this dramatic shift in the continent's behavior? To answer that, we need to dive deeper into the science of Antarctica's ice sheets and glaciers. These massive frozen structures are not just sitting there, harmless and passive. They are constantly in motion, and their movements can be influenced by a variety of factors, both natural and human-made. One of the most significant contributors to Antarctica's shifting ice sheets is the increasing temperatures of the surrounding ocean waters. The Southern Ocean, which encircles Antarctica, has been warming at an alarming rate over the past few decades. As the planet's climate continues to change, ocean temperatures in this region are rising faster than in almost any other part of the world. This warming ocean water seeps underneath the floating ice shelves that extend from the continent, causing them to melt from below. This process is known as basal melting, and it's been happening at an accelerating rate, eating away at the ice shelves from the bottom up. This destabilizes the entire structure of the glaciers, making them more vulnerable to collapse. But there's more at play here than just rising temperatures. Researchers have found that the warming waters are not the only factor causing Antarctica's glaciers to shift. Beneath the surface of the continent lies a labyrinth of interconnected faults and rifts in the Earth's crust. These geological features are more than just cracks in the ground. They are the weak points that hold Antarctica's vast ice sheets in place. As these fault lines shift and move, they can trigger massive ice displacements. Some scientists believe that the increased pressure from the melting ice could actually cause these fault lines to shift more rapidly, further destabilizing the continent. Imagine the pressure building up inside a snowball as it rolls downhill, gathering more and more momentum with every passing second. That's the kind of situation Antarctica is facing right now. There's another aspect of Antarctica's shifting that hasn't been widely discussed, and it's equally concerning. The ice sheet is not just retreating at the edges, it's also shifting from within. In 2020, scientists observed that the East Antarctic ice sheet, long considered stable and unaffected by climate change, has started to show signs of movement. This region was once thought to be immune to the effects of warming, but data has shown that parts of the ice sheet are now moving faster, especially around the coastal areas. Some believe that this could be the start of a much larger shift, one that could lead to the rapid collapse of vast sections of the ice sheet, releasing even more ice into the ocean and accelerating global sea level rise. The potential consequences of this are terrifying to consider, but it's a possibility that scientists are now seriously investigating. And then there's the issue of what lies beneath Antarctica itself. Beneath the ice, the landforms are not flat and featureless, as we once thought. In fact, they are riddled with deep valleys, mountains, and ancient riverbeds, all of which play a role in the shifting of the continent's ice. One of the most fascinating and alarming discoveries came in 2019, when scientists discovered an enormous river system running beneath Antarctica. These rivers, some of which are many miles wide, could be influencing the movement of the ice above them. The water beneath the ice sheet is likely lubricating the flow of ice, causing it to move more quickly than we ever imagined. This could create a feedback loop. As the ice flows faster, it creates more space for the water beneath it to flow, which in turn accelerates the movement of the ice. It's a chain reaction that could be unstoppable once it begins. What does this all mean for the future? If Antarctica continues to shift, and its glaciers continue to retreat at this accelerated pace, the consequences could be global in scale. Sea level rise, driven by the loss of Antarctica's ice, could disrupt coastlines around the world. Entire countries like the Maldives, Bangladesh, and even parts of the United States could be completely submerged, displacing billions of people in the process. But it's not just the land that's at risk. Rising sea levels could also cause significant changes to weather patterns, disrupting ecosystems and making parts of the world uninhabitable. The loss of ice in Antarctica could change the distribution of heat around the globe, potentially causing dramatic shifts in global climate systems, and not in a way that humanity can easily adapt to. Antarctica's shifting is a phenomenon that, though still in the early stages, has the potential to change the very fabric of our planet. The pace of these changes is accelerating, and the effects could be felt within our lifetimes. While it might still seem distant and abstract, the reality is that we are already witnessing the beginnings of something that could lead to a global catastrophe. Scientists are working tirelessly to understand what is happening in Antarctica, but there are still so many unknowns. What happens next could depend on how much action we take in addressing climate change and the ways we manage the delicate balance of our planet's systems. As this massive frozen continent continues to shift, one question looms larger than all others. How much time do we really have before it's too late? As Antarctica continues to shift, scientists have begun to focus on a specific area that could trigger catastrophic changes for the world. The Thwaites Glacier, often called the Doomsday Glacier, has become a major point of concern due to its rapid and unprecedented movement. This glacier, located in the West Antarctic ice sheet, has been retreating at alarming rates, with some sections now moving up to 300 meters per year, significantly faster than previously expected. To put this into perspective, just 50 years ago, the glacier moved at a slow and steady pace of about 20 meters annually. The increase in speed is a direct result of climate change and the warming of the surrounding waters, which are eroding the glacier's ice shelves from below. The Thwaites Glacier holds a mind-boggling amount of ice, enough to raise global sea levels by about 3 meters if it were to melt entirely. That may sound like a long-shot event, but the rapid changes we're witnessing now suggest that it could be happening sooner than scientists predicted. In fact, some experts warn that it may be a matter of decades before the glacier reaches a tipping point. The loss of Thwaites alone could lead to a significant rise in sea levels, triggering widespread coastal flooding across the world. Cities like New York, Miami, and Jakarta could see parts of their infrastructure submerged, affecting billions of people living in coastal regions. But it doesn't end there. The destabilization of Thwaites Glacier could act as a domino effect, causing other glaciers in the region to follow suit. The Pine Island Glacier, another large glacier in West Antarctica, is already showing signs of rapid retreat. Together, these glaciers form a part of the Antarctic ice sheet's backbone, and the loss of one could destabilize the others. Should this cascade effect occur, we could witness an acceleration in sea level rise that could dramatically reshape coastlines across the globe. To further complicate matters, scientists are not entirely sure what would happen to the Earth's climate if a large portion of Antarctica's ice were to disappear. While sea levels would rise significantly, there are other potential changes to the atmosphere that remain poorly understood. The disappearance of so much ice could alter global weather patterns in ways that we aren't fully equipped to predict. The loss of reflective ice would also reduce the Earth's albedo, meaning more solar radiation would be absorbed by the Earth, potentially speeding up the warming process. One of the most startling aspects of the shifting Antarctic landscape is how little we understand about the processes driving these changes. While we can observe the retreat of glaciers from satellite images, much of the underlying activity is hidden beneath thick layers of ice. The role of the oceans in melting the glaciers is still a matter of intense study. Ocean currents around Antarctica have been shifting as well, which could be accelerating the glacier's disintegration. Warmer waters are slowly seeping under the ice shelves, causing them to melt from beneath. These basal melts are particularly concerning because they're difficult to detect and even harder to predict, meaning scientists are flying blind when it comes to understanding just how quickly the glaciers are melting. In the face of all this, scientists are racing to understand just how long we have before reaching a point of no return. The situation is so dire that several international research projects have been launched in recent years to study the dynamics of Antarctica. The International Thwaites Glacier Collaboration, for example, is a project involving scientists from the United States, the United Kingdom, and other countries, focused on investigating the causes of the glacier's retreat. They've sent research teams to the glacier itself, using icebreakers, drones, and autonomous underwater vehicles to gather data and monitor changes in real time. Even with these efforts, some scientists remain concerned that we're already too late to prevent significant changes. The ice that has already been lost from Thwaites and Pine Island is unlikely to be recovered, and the question now is how to mitigate the effects of the future ice melt. Some have proposed geoengineering solutions, such as artificially cooling the oceans near Antarctica or building massive barriers to protect the ice shelves. But these ideas are still in the realm of science fiction, with no feasible plan in sight. However, the biggest issue isn't just the direct impact of the ice melt on sea levels. The shifting Antarctic ice sheet has the potential to disrupt entire ecosystems. The vast expanse of ice that currently covers Antarctica plays a crucial role in maintaining ocean circulation patterns. These currents are responsible for regulating temperatures across the globe. If Antarctica's ice sheets continue to collapse, there could be disruptions in the movement of cold water, which would throw the entire system off balance. This disruption could affect not only the climate but also marine life and global food chains, as changes in temperature and water currents could cause ecosystems to collapse in unpredictable ways. But on a more practical level, the shifting of Antarctica could put immense pressure on the global economy. Coastal cities and islands are already facing the threat of flooding, and a large-scale melt of Antarctica's ice sheets could mean the loss of critical infrastructure. Consider this: much of the world's trade and commerce occurs in coastal cities, with ports being essential for the movement of goods. A rise in sea levels could damage or even submerge these ports, disrupting the global economy. What happens when the shipping lanes that carry everything from oil to food become impassable? The cascading effects on global trade could be catastrophic. The good news, though, is that we're not entirely helpless. Understanding what's happening in Antarctica is the first step toward mitigating the damage. As scientists continue to study the shifting landscape, it's possible that we could develop better climate models to predict future events. There's also potential for policy shifts and international cooperation to slow down the process, though that would require unprecedented global commitment. Reducing emissions and limiting the warming of the oceans could slow the melting of glaciers, giving us more time to adapt to the changing world. In the meantime, we can only watch as the ice sheets of Antarctica continue their slow but relentless march toward the sea. Every day, the Earth shifts in ways that seem small at first but have long-reaching consequences. Antarctica's ice, once seen as a vast, immutable expanse, is no longer the frozen fortress it once was. With each passing year, it draws us closer to a future where we must grapple with the consequences of our changing planet. One of the primary reasons Antarctica's glaciers are rapidly retreating is the accelerated warming of the planet, largely driven by human activity. Specifically, the increase in greenhouse gas emissions from burning fossil fuels, deforestation, and industrial agriculture has led to a significant rise in global temperatures, which is having a direct impact on polar regions like Antarctica. The burning of fossil fuels releases carbon dioxide, CO2, and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, where they trap heat. This phenomenon, known as the greenhouse effect, prevents heat from escaping into space, warming the Earth. While this effect is natural and necessary for life on Earth, The vast increase in CO2 and other greenhouse gases since the Industrial Revolution has intensified this effect, causing global temperatures to rise at an unprecedented rate. As the Earth warms, the effects are more pronounced in the polar regions, where the rate of warming is much higher than the global average. This is known as polar amplification. In Antarctica, this warming manifests in several ways. First, the surrounding ocean waters are warming, which has a direct impact on the ice sheets. The Thwaites Glacier, in particular, is vulnerable to the warming of ocean currents that flow underneath it. These warmer waters are eroding the ice shelves from below, causing them to thin and weaken. As the ice shelves weaken, they are less able to support the massive ice sheets behind them, causing the glaciers to retreat more rapidly. This process is difficult to reverse because once the ice shelves are gone, the glaciers can flow more freely into the ocean, contributing directly to sea level rise. Moreover, warmer air temperatures are also playing a significant role. Air temperatures in Antarctica are rising, especially during the summer months, causing more surface melt. This meltwater forms pools on the surface of the ice, which can seep into cracks and crevasses in the glacier. As the meltwater infiltrates the ice, it can lubricate the base of the glacier, allowing it to move more quickly toward the ocean. This process, known as hydraulic lubrication, accelerates the glacier's flow and increases the rate at which it loses mass. Another important factor is the loss of albedo effect in the region. Albedo refers to the reflectivity of the Earth's surface. Ice and snow have a high albedo, meaning they reflect a significant portion of the sun's energy back into space. However, as the ice melts and exposes darker surfaces, such as ocean water or land, less solar radiation is reflected, and more is absorbed. This leads to a positive feedback loop. As the ice melts and exposes darker surfaces, more heat is absorbed, causing further warming and accelerating the melt. This process is particularly evident in the Arctic, but it is also occurring in Antarctica. In addition to these factors, the rapid loss of ice from Antarctica is also influenced by the broader context of global climate patterns. Climate change has altered wind and weather patterns, contributing to the warming of polar regions. The weakening of the ozone layer, although it has been recovering due to international efforts, has also played a role in the warming of the southern hemisphere, as it affects the distribution of heat in the atmosphere. The combination of these factors, rising temperatures, changes in ocean currents, loss of albedo, and shifting climate patterns, has created a perfect storm for the glaciers in Antarctica. The region is warming faster than most places on Earth, and the feedback loops at play are pushing the ice sheets toward an irreversible collapse. Furthermore, human activity is not only affecting the global climate but also directly impacting the environment. The continued emission of greenhouse gases is a result of industrial practices, urbanization, and agricultural activities that are not being mitigated at a fast enough rate. Even though renewable energy sources like solar and wind power are growing, fossil fuel consumption continues to be widespread, contributing to the ongoing warming of the planet. The reality of this situation is sobering. The retreat of Antarctica's glaciers is not just a natural fluctuation but a direct consequence of human actions. Without significant and immediate action to curb greenhouse gas emissions and limit global warming, the effects of Antarctica's melting ice could be felt for generations to come. Rising sea levels, shifting ecosystems, and the destabilization of global weather patterns are just a few of the potential consequences we face if this trend continues unchecked. As we look deeper into why Antarctica's glaciers are retreating at such an alarming rate, it becomes clear that the reasons go beyond the simple idea of rising temperatures. It's a complex web of interconnected factors that feed into one another, each contributing to the ice loss in ways we're just starting to fully understand. One of the most powerful drivers of this retreat is the role of feedback loops. You see, as the atmosphere warms, it sets off a chain reaction that makes the situation worse. When the ice on Antarctica melts, it reveals darker surfaces underneath, like rock or water. These dark surfaces absorb more sunlight, and that absorbed energy only accelerates the melting process. The result? A vicious cycle where the more ice melts, the faster it melts. This is called the ice albedo feedback, and it's a dangerous loop that's intensifying the problem. But it doesn't stop there. The dynamics of how glaciers move are changing too. Under normal conditions, glaciers flow at a slow and steady pace. However, as the warming temperatures melt more and more of the ice, something surprising happens. The glaciers start to flow much more rapidly toward the ocean. This is driven, in part, by the increasing amounts of meltwater pooling on the surface of the glaciers. As this water flows down through cracks in the ice, it acts like a lubricant, causing the glaciers to move faster. Imagine a snowball rolling down a hill, but with each roll it gathers more and more speed. That's essentially what's happening to the glaciers now, and it's speeding up their retreat significantly. And let's not forget about the precipitation patterns. While many places are experiencing more rainfall due to climate change, Antarctica isn't immune to these shifts either. What's happening here is that warmer temperatures are leading to more rain than snow. And when rain falls on the ice sheets, it doesn't help build them up, it causes them to melt faster. The rainwater seeps through the ice, weakening it from within. This rapid surface melt, especially on the Antarctic Peninsula, is compounding the problem, creating conditions where the ice is thinning faster than it can recover. Now, while all of this may sound like a result of a warming atmosphere, there's also something far more hidden beneath the surface of Antarctica: volcanic activity. Yes, you heard that right, volcanoes. Beneath the ice sheets of Antarctica lie several active volcanoes. These volcanoes, such as Mount Erebus, release heat and gases, which, over time, can destabilize the ice above. As the heat from volcanic activity melts the ice from below, it weakens the ice sheets, making them more vulnerable to collapse. This process is subtle but no less impactful, as it combines with other environmental changes to create a perfect storm for ice loss. Ocean currents are also playing a more direct role than we might realize. The Southern Ocean, which surrounds Antarctica, is not what it once was. In recent decades, we've seen an increase in the flow of warm ocean water toward the ice shelves. This is especially true in regions where ocean currents are reaching deeper into the Antarctic system, coming into direct contact with the floating ice shelves. These warmer waters melt the ice from below, weakening the ice shelves that have long acted as a barrier, preventing the glaciers from flowing into the sea. And as the ice shelves thin out, the glaciers are free to move more rapidly into the ocean, further increasing the rate of ice loss. But even more unsettling is how shifts in wind patterns and atmospheric pressure systems are affecting the ice. In many parts of the world, the jet stream has become erratic due to climate change. This change has allowed warm winds to reach areas that were once isolated from such conditions. On Antarctica, this means that the ice shelves are subjected to stronger winds that push them toward the sea, increasing stress and leading to faster disintegration. These changing pressure systems are causing more frequent breakups of the ice, and with each breakup, the glaciers flow more rapidly toward the ocean. Beneath the ice, there's another factor at play: subglacial lakes. These hidden bodies of water beneath the ice sheets may not seem like a big deal at first glance, but they are playing a crucial role in the stability of the ice. When these lakes drain or shift in size, they can release pressure on the ice, allowing it to move more quickly toward the sea. It's a delicate balance, and even slight changes in temperature or water flow can destabilize the entire system, causing more rapid ice movement and melt. Another significant process is called marine ice cliff instability. Essentially, this is when towering ice cliffs along the edges of glaciers, once held in place by the ice shelves, become too tall and unstable to remain standing. The ice shelves melting causes these cliffs to crumble and collapse, and when they fall, they expose the glaciers behind them to more stress. As a result, more ice is released into the ocean, contributing to rising sea levels. This process is already happening in areas like the Antarctic Peninsula and parts of West Antarctica, where tall ice cliffs are beginning to break apart more frequently. And of course, we must address the role of global climate action in all of this. As we understand more about these processes, it becomes clear that what happens in Antarctica is not just a distant scientific curiosity, it's a global issue. The forces at work here, from changing ocean currents to melting glaciers, are directly tied to the broader trends of global warming. And that's why addressing these issues requires more than just scientific exploration. It requires coordinated action on a global scale. Without reducing carbon emissions and taking meaningful steps to curb climate change, the trajectory of ice sheet loss will continue to accelerate. It's up to governments, organizations, and individuals alike to contribute to the solution, or we risk crossing a point of no return. The rise in sea levels, driven by the accelerated melting of Antarctica's glaciers, is not just a future threat, it's a present reality that has already begun to reshape the coastal landscape around the world. The relentless retreat of ice in the Antarctic is contributing vast amounts of water to the oceans, adding to the already alarming levels of global sea rise. This isn't just a gradual shift, but a force of nature that could have sweeping consequences for millions of people who live along coastlines. Coastal cities, which house a significant portion of the world's population, are particularly vulnerable. As glaciers and ice sheets continue to disintegrate, the cumulative effect on sea levels is becoming more pronounced. The process of melting isn't occurring in isolation either. There's also the added factor of thermal expansion, a less visible but equally devastating phenomenon. As the atmosphere warms due to increasing greenhouse gas emissions, the oceans absorb much of this heat. This extra heat causes seawater to expand, further pushing sea levels upward. This dual force, the melting of ice and the expansion of seawater, means that even if we were able to stop all emissions today, the trajectory of rising sea levels would continue for centuries, possibly even millennia. The immediate consequence of rising sea levels is most starkly felt in low-lying coastal areas that were once considered safe from flooding. Major cities like Miami, New York, and Jakarta are already beginning to experience the early signs of encroaching seas. In these regions, high tides are more frequent and more intense, and storm surges are becoming more destructive, flooding streets, homes, and businesses that were never built to withstand such intrusions. In some places, like the Maldives and Kiribati, entire nations face an existential threat from the rising waters. These islands, some of the lowest on Earth, could soon find themselves completely submerged, forcing their populations to relocate. The effects of rising sea levels are not just about water flooding the land, but also about the intrusion of salt water into freshwater systems. As salt water moves inland, it can contaminate drinking water supplies, making fresh water increasingly scarce for millions of people who rely on coastal aquifers. This contamination would place immense strain on already stressed resources, forcing communities to either adapt or face severe challenges in terms of basic survival needs. In addition to the direct impacts on human settlements, rising sea levels are set to wreak havoc on ecosystems that depend on stable coastal environments. Wetlands, marshes, and mangroves act as vital buffers against storms, flooding, and coastal erosion. As sea levels rise, these natural protectors are being drowned by the very waters they help to keep at bay. The loss of these ecosystems could accelerate the destruction of coastlines, making them more susceptible to the ravages of future storms and flooding events. Mangrove forests, in particular, are crucial for maintaining biodiversity and providing safe habitats for countless species of fish, birds, and other wildlife. Their loss would have devastating effects on both local ecosystems and the livelihoods of the communities that rely on them for food and resources. Similarly, coral reefs, which are already under stress from warming ocean temperatures, are in danger of being washed away by the rising seas. Coral reefs provide essential services, from supporting marine life to protecting shorelines from erosion. Without them, coastlines would become even more exposed, accelerating the damage done by rising waters. The threat of sea level rise doesn't stop at the ocean's edge, it extends inland, reaching further and further as the seas advance. For countries with large river deltas, like Egypt, Bangladesh, and Vietnam, this could spell disaster for agriculture. Saltwater intrusion into freshwater rivers and lakes would render large swaths of farmland unproductive, leading to crop failures and significant food shortages. Entire industries that rely on these lands, such as fishing and farming, could collapse, creating economic devastation for millions of people. The loss of land to the sea would also force people to move, sometimes within their own countries, sometimes across borders. Climate migration could lead to overcrowded conditions in places that are already struggling to cope with their populations, leading to increased tensions over resources and potentially sparking conflicts. As the seas continue to rise, the global economy will also face enormous costs. The damage to infrastructure alone will be astronomical. Roads, bridges, ports, and airports built along the coasts would be inundated by the rising tides, forcing governments to either spend vast sums of money to protect these assets or abandon them altogether. Insurance companies will find themselves increasingly unable to cover the damage, leading to a collapse in the availability of coverage for coastal properties. For people who live in these areas, home values could plummet as the risk of flooding becomes too great to ignore, leaving individuals and families struggling to sell their homes and relocate. Even industries not directly related to coastal areas will be affected, as the disruptions to shipping routes, supply chains, and global trade are inevitable. The economic ripple effect will be felt far and wide, with industries such as agriculture, tourism, and manufacturing all bearing the brunt of a planet that is rapidly changing beneath their feet. Moreover, the rising sea levels are poised to transform coastal ecosystems in profound ways, triggering a cascade of environmental changes that will affect not only the natural habitats, but also the communities that depend on them. Coastal areas are some of the most biodiverse on the planet, hosting a wide variety of ecosystems such as wetlands, marshes, mangroves, coral reefs, and seagrass meadows. These ecosystems provide a host of essential services, from filtering pollutants and providing food sources to acting as buffers against extreme weather events. However, as sea levels continue to rise, these delicate ecosystems are under intense threat, with long-term consequences that will ripple through the environment and the global economy. Wetlands, often called the planet's kidneys, play a crucial role in maintaining the health of coastal regions. They act as natural filters, trapping pollutants from runoff, absorbing excess nutrients, and preventing erosion by stabilizing the soil. However, as the sea encroaches upon these areas, wetlands are gradually being inundated with salt water, altering their composition and functionality. The gradual flooding of wetlands with saline water leads to the loss of freshwater species, transforming vibrant ecosystems into less productive environments. The vegetation that once thrived in these areas, such as reeds and grasses, is replaced by salt-tolerant species, which cannot support the same level of biodiversity. In some cases, entire wetlands could be submerged underwater, stripping coastal areas of vital natural defenses against storms, surges, and flooding. Without wetlands to absorb and mitigate the impacts of rising seas and severe weather events, the surrounding communities become much more vulnerable to disasters such as flooding and soil erosion. Mangroves, another key component of coastal ecosystems, are similarly under threat. These unique forests, found in tropical and subtropical regions, act as buffers between land and sea, absorbing the impact of waves and storms. Their intricate root systems help stabilize the shoreline, preventing erosion and reducing the force of tidal waves. Mangroves are also incredibly important for biodiversity, serving as breeding grounds and nurseries for countless marine species. As sea levels rise, however, these coastal forests are being pushed inland, but they are often unable to migrate fast enough to keep up with the changing environment. In some areas, the rate of sea level rise exceeds the mangrove's ability to adapt, leading to their eventual decline. The loss of mangrove forests is not only detrimental to the marine life that depends on them, but also to the coastal communities that rely on their protection and resources. Fishing industries, which depend on the biodiversity of these ecosystems, could experience a sharp decline as the habitat for fish species vanishes. Additionally, the loss of mangroves means that the buffer against coastal storms is weakened, leaving coastal communities more vulnerable to the devastating impacts of extreme weather events. Coral reefs, often referred to as the rainforests of the sea, are among the most diverse and productive ecosystems on Earth. They support an array of marine species, provide food for millions of people, and offer coastal protection by reducing the power of waves. However, coral reefs are also highly sensitive to changes in temperature, ocean acidification, and rising sea levels. When sea levels rise, the increased depth of the water can limit the amount of sunlight that reaches the coral, disrupting their ability to photosynthesize and weakening their overall health. Moreover, the rise in ocean temperature, driven by climate change, has already led to widespread coral bleaching, where corals expel the symbiotic algae that live within their tissues, depriving them of the nutrients they need to survive. With the combined stress of rising seas and increasing temperatures, many coral reefs are already showing signs of irreparable damage. The loss of coral reefs will have far-reaching consequences for marine biodiversity, as countless species of fish and other marine life rely on coral reefs for shelter, food, and breeding grounds. The collapse of these ecosystems will not only diminish marine biodiversity but also disrupt local economies that depend on coral reefs for tourism and fisheries. Seagrass meadows, another vital part of coastal ecosystems, are also under threat from rising sea levels. Seagrass plays a crucial role in maintaining coastal health by stabilizing sediments, preventing erosion, and filtering water. It also provides a habitat for a wide variety of marine species, including sea turtles, fish, and invertebrates. As sea levels rise, however, the deeper waters can limit the amount of sunlight that seagrass meadows receive, causing them to die off. The loss of seagrass further exacerbates the impacts of coastal erosion, as the plant's roots no longer hold the soil in place. Additionally, seagrass meadows serve as vital carbon sinks, helping to absorb and store large amounts of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. The decline of seagrass ecosystems means that less carbon will be sequestered, contributing to the acceleration of climate change. The broader ecological consequences of these changes are immense. Coastal ecosystems form the foundation of food webs, and their destruction will lead to cascading effects throughout the marine and terrestrial environments. As these ecosystems disappear, so too will the species that rely on them. Fish populations, for example, will be decimated as their breeding and nursery habitats are destroyed. The decline in fish stocks will have serious implications for global food security, particularly in regions where communities rely heavily on seafood as a primary source of nutrition. The loss of biodiversity within coastal ecosystems will also weaken the resilience of these areas, making them more vulnerable to future environmental stresses, such as hurricanes, flooding, and heat waves. Moreover, as coastal ecosystems are degraded, the ability of natural habitats to mitigate the effects of climate change, through carbon sequestration, storm protection, and water filtration, diminishes, creating a feedback loop that accelerates the degradation of both the environment and the communities that depend on it. The effects of rising sea levels on coastal ecosystems are not only environmental but also socioeconomic. Many coastal communities are intimately connected with their ecosystems, relying on resources such as fish, shellfish, and plant life for their livelihoods. As these resources dwindle or disappear, entire economies could collapse, leading to widespread poverty and displacement. In many cases, the people who will be most affected are those who have contributed least to the causes of climate change. Indigenous communities, small island nations, and low-income countries will bear the brunt of the damage, despite having minimal responsibility for global emissions. As ecosystems collapse and human communities face increasing pressures, the social fabric of these regions could be torn apart, with devastating consequences for both human and environmental health. The rise of sea levels and the ensuing destruction of coastal ecosystems represent one of the most profound environmental challenges of our time. The natural world that has evolved to thrive in these regions is being pushed to the brink of collapse, with cascading effects that will echo throughout ecosystems, economies, and societies. Without immediate and concerted efforts to mitigate climate change and protect coastal ecosystems, the losses will be irreparable. Every effort made to preserve these vital habitats could help safeguard not only the environment, but the well-being of millions of people who rely on them for survival. The choices made today will determine the fate of these ecosystems, and by extension, the future of our planet. As we delve deeper into the potential ramifications of rising sea levels on coastal ecosystems, it's crucial to recognize that the impacts are far from uniform. The way each unique coastal ecosystem will respond depends on numerous factors, including geographical location, the existing health of the ecosystem, and the speed at which sea levels rise. Some regions, already suffering from the effects of climate change, may see these changes unfold much more rapidly than others. In this ever-evolving scenario, even the smallest shifts in the balance of these ecosystems could trigger unpredictable, and often irreversible, consequences. One particularly striking aspect of rising sea levels is the phenomenon of coastal squeeze. This term refers to the situation where rising seas press against natural barriers, like cliffs, buildings, or roads, without the ability to retreat inland. As the ocean encroaches further onto the land, many ecosystems, particularly those in flatter areas, will find themselves unable to adapt fast enough. Wetlands, salt marshes, and mangroves, which are normally accustomed to fluctuating tides, struggle to move inland when human infrastructure blocks their path. This means that they essentially get squeezed out, leading to their rapid degradation. Not only does this decrease biodiversity, but it also eliminates the protective roles these ecosystems play in buffering coastal communities from storms and flooding. The loss of these natural barriers intensifies the vulnerability of both the environment and human settlements, exacerbating the risk of disaster. Even more concerning is the potential for ecosystem fragmentation, which occurs when habitats become isolated due to changing conditions. For example, as sea levels rise, saltwater may infiltrate freshwater rivers and lakes, turning once thriving freshwater ecosystems into brackish or even saltwater environments. This shift can create an inhospitable environment for species that rely on freshwater habitats, while also altering the food webs in these areas. As a result, some species will face extinction, while others, better suited to the new conditions, may proliferate. This disruption of balance can cause the collapse of entire ecosystems, affecting everything from small invertebrates to large predator species, and further destabilizing the region. These cascading effects reach far beyond the coastlines, affecting fisheries, tourism, and local economies in ways that could be hard to predict but certainly devastating. For those ecosystems that manage to adapt to rising seas, the process will be far from smooth. Coral reefs, for example, have been battling not only rising temperatures but also the gradual encroachment of ocean water. As sea levels rise, the coral polyps that form the reefs could be displaced, causing them to struggle to adapt to the changing depths. Reefs need sunlight for photosynthesis, and if the sea rises too quickly, the deeper waters won't allow the coral to thrive. This could result in what's known as reef flattening, where entire coral structures are lost to the ocean. As coral reefs continue to degrade, they not only lose their ability to provide a habitat for fish and other marine creatures but also become less effective at buffering the impacts of rising seas. Without these natural barriers, coastal communities will face greater damage from waves and storm surges, making their livelihoods even more precarious. The rapid loss of coastal ecosystems also threatens to disrupt the intricate relationships between marine and terrestrial species. Birds, for example, rely on coastal wetlands for breeding, feeding, and resting during migration. As these areas shrink, many bird species will face declining populations due to a lack of suitable habitats. The loss of fish species due to disappearing coral reefs and mangroves will have a ripple effect up the food chain, affecting birds, marine mammals, and even humans who rely on fishing as a primary source of income. In turn, this could further alter the biodiversity of the region, leaving behind a less resilient ecosystem, incapable of withstanding future environmental pressures. These ecological changes also bring forth profound implications for the local economies tied to coastal regions. Fishing industries, which provide sustenance and employment for millions of people worldwide, are particularly vulnerable. As vital fish habitats, like mangrove forests and coral reefs, degrade due to rising sea levels, the populations of fish and other marine organisms dwindle. For many coastal communities, fishing is more than a way of life, it's a cultural tradition. As these ecosystems vanish, they take with them not only a food source but also a way of life. The social and economic ramifications could be felt for generations to come, especially in areas where marine resources are integral to survival. In addition to fishing, tourism in coastal areas is also at risk. Coral reefs, sandy beaches, and mangrove forests are significant draws for visitors, providing local economies with income from recreational activities such as diving, boating, and ecotourism. If these ecosystems degrade, the tourism industry, which supports jobs and local businesses, will suffer tremendously. Once pristine beaches may erode, and coral reefs may turn into barren underwater landscapes. As a result, areas that once thrived on the economic benefits of tourism may see a rapid decline in revenue, pushing local populations into poverty. The impact of rising seas on coastal ecosystems is not only an environmental issue but a pressing social and economic challenge. It forces us to confront the delicate balance that coastal communities maintain with their surrounding environments. Whether through the loss of livelihoods or the displacement of entire populations, the consequences of these environmental changes are far-reaching. The story of rising sea levels is not just about the environment, it's about real people, cultures, and ways of life that stand at the brink of disappearing. As the situation becomes more urgent, it's essential to remember that the fate of coastal ecosystems is intertwined with the fate of humanity itself. The interconnectedness of all living systems underscores the importance of taking action to slow the rise in sea levels and to protect these invaluable ecosystems. We must recognize the environmental, economic, and social value of coastal habitats and prioritize their preservation before the irreversible damage becomes too great. If we fail to act swiftly, the consequences will be felt by future generations, who will inherit a world vastly different from the one we know today. As the rising sea levels encroach on coastal areas, the effects are far-reaching, with agriculture and freshwater supplies standing at the forefront of this global challenge. These two critical resources, which sustain life and economies around the world, are increasingly vulnerable to the changing landscape created by climate change and rising ocean waters. The delicate balance that allows for the growth of crops and the availability of clean, accessible fresh water is being disrupted in ways that we are only beginning to fully understand. The strain this places on agricultural systems and water resources has the potential to create a ripple effect that threatens not only food security, but also the livelihoods of millions who depend on these systems for survival. In the most vulnerable coastal regions, the intrusion of seawater into freshwater aquifers is one of the most immediate and severe consequences of rising sea levels. As saltwater pushes further inland, it seeps into underground reservoirs of freshwater, contaminating them. These aquifers, often the primary source of drinking water for communities and irrigation for crops, become tainted with salt, making them undrinkable and unusable for agriculture. Without access to fresh water, crops wither, and agricultural production plummets. This is particularly devastating for nations and regions that are already water scarce, where fresh water is a commodity that many struggle to access even without the added pressure of saltwater intrusion. The damage to freshwater resources does not end there. Rising sea levels exacerbate flooding, causing rivers and lakes to overflow, sweeping away fertile soil and leaving behind waterlogged fields. In areas where flooding becomes more frequent, farmers face the loss of entire crops, their fields inundated with seawater that makes growing anything almost impossible. Beyond the direct impact on the soil and crops, the persistent flooding can also render agricultural land unusable for extended periods. In places where food production is already precarious, this additional burden pushes entire communities to the brink, leading them to rely on aid, trade, and resources that are often scarce. In areas where crops depend heavily on irrigation systems supplied by freshwater sources, the situation becomes even more dire. For many agricultural regions, especially those in low-lying coastal plains, irrigation is essential for maintaining crop yields. Yet with saltwater creeping into freshwater rivers and lakes, irrigation systems that once delivered clean water to fields are now tainted. Without access to fresh water for irrigation, the ability to grow food on these lands diminishes drastically. What was once fertile ground now becomes barren and unproductive, leaving farmers without the means to sustain their livelihoods. This impacts not just the local food supply, but global markets as well, as crops like rice, wheat, and corn, staples for much of the world's population, may no longer be viable in certain regions. The consequences of sea level rise on agriculture extend beyond just water availability. Soil erosion, which often accompanies the loss of coastal ecosystems such as wetlands and mangrove forests, leaves behind depleted and nutrient-poor land. The rich, fertile soils that once supported vast fields of crops are washed away by surging tides, reducing the land's ability to retain moisture and support plant life. As a result, even with the availability of fresh water, crops may not thrive on the depleted soil left behind. This further exacerbates food insecurity, as farmers are forced to either abandon their land or attempt to cultivate crops in increasingly harsh conditions. The combination of soil erosion, saltwater contamination, and loss of agricultural land due to flooding creates a devastating feedback loop, one that makes it all but impossible for certain regions to recover. While coastal areas are among the most vulnerable to the rising sea, inland regions are not immune to the cascading effects of agricultural strain. For example, the disruption of global food production systems can lead to dramatic price increases in staple crops. As regions dependent on agricultural exports suffer from diminished yields, markets worldwide will feel the impact. Higher food prices could push millions of people in developing countries into extreme poverty, leading to social unrest and migration as people seek more fertile and secure areas to live. The competition for land, water, and resources will intensify, and without adequate infrastructure and policies in place, these tensions could spill over into conflict, further exacerbating the challenges posed by climate change. In addition to direct agricultural losses, the long-term effects of sea level rise on farming systems include the displacement of farming communities. Rising waters, frequent flooding, and the salinization of once fertile lands force farmers to abandon their homes and fields, creating a mass exodus from coastal regions. As farmers move inland or to higher ground, they may face competition for already scarce resources, further stressing agricultural systems in other areas. This displacement is not only a matter of survival for these communities but also raises significant challenges in terms of social integration and the provision of resources for displaced populations. The ripple effect of these migrations could result in shifts in population density and land use patterns, creating even more strain on agricultural systems and water supplies further inland. Freshwater scarcity is already a growing concern in many parts of the world, and sea level rise only accelerates the rate at which this crisis unfolds. Countries that rely on glaciers for their freshwater supply, glaciers that are rapidly melting due to rising global temperatures, will see a decrease in freshwater availability. As sea levels rise, they will affect river deltas where fresh water meets salt water, such as in the Nile Delta and the Mekong Delta. Here, rising sea levels threaten to push saltwater upstream, potentially altering the balance of freshwater systems that provide water for drinking, agriculture, and industry. This process of saltwater intrusion can be difficult to reverse, leaving entire populations vulnerable to water shortages. In addition to the threats to freshwater and agricultural systems, the effects of rising sea levels on these resources carry profound economic consequences. Agriculture remains a cornerstone of many developing economies, providing jobs, food, and trade value. The breakdown of agricultural systems in these regions could stymie entire economies, leading to a rise in unemployment and poverty. As food scarcity increases, countries that rely on imports to meet their food demands may experience disruptions in supply chains, further inflating prices and driving inequality. Meanwhile, the pressure on freshwater resources will lead to increased competition for water, not only between agriculture and urban populations but also between industries, agriculture, and nature itself. The challenges posed by rising sea levels to agriculture and freshwater supplies are not distant possibilities. They are here, and they are accelerating. As these changes unfold, it becomes increasingly clear that the world must find innovative ways to manage and preserve water and land resources. By protecting vital ecosystems, implementing sustainable agricultural practices, and investing in technologies that conserve and optimize water usage, there is hope that we can mitigate some of the damage already set in motion. But time is running out. The longer we delay action, the more severe the consequences will be for food security, freshwater supply, and the millions of people who depend on these resources every day. The strain on agriculture and water systems, if left unchecked, could well be one of the most pressing challenges humanity faces in the coming decades. Furthermore, the rapid changes occurring in Antarctica are at the heart of many of the weather disturbances that we're now witnessing globally. As the ice sheets continue to disintegrate, they aren't just causing sea levels to rise, they're also significantly influencing the broader climate system. Antarctica is often referred to as the cooling engine of the planet, because it plays a crucial role in regulating global atmospheric circulation patterns. As the ice melts, it releases cold, fresh water into the surrounding oceans, and this disrupts the delicate balance of ocean currents that have traditionally carried warm water to the northern latitudes and cold water to the southern reaches of the globe. This disturbance in ocean currents is a key factor behind the shifting extreme weather events. When these currents slow down or shift, it has a domino effect on weather patterns, leading to more unpredictable and severe conditions. For example, the Gulf Stream, which brings warm water from the Gulf of Mexico toward Europe, is directly impacted by the freshwater influx from Antarctica. As the flow of this warm water diminishes, Europe's climate becomes cooler and more unpredictable, while other parts of the world, particularly the tropics, experience extreme heat. The melting of Antarctic ice also impacts the jet stream, a critical atmospheric circulation that helps steer weather systems around the world. As the ice sheets collapse, the changes in temperature and atmospheric pressure patterns cause the jet stream to become wavier, making it more prone to bringing extreme and erratic weather. This results in longer heat waves, more intense cold spells, and irregular weather patterns that are harder to predict. One of the more striking impacts of these shifts is the increasing frequency and intensity of storms, especially those in the northern hemisphere. The alteration in the global circulation system is one of the key drivers behind the formation of more powerful hurricanes and cyclones. These storms now have the ability to gain more strength due to the warmer oceans and the shifting atmospheric conditions that influence their development. This can lead to storms that are more erratic, harder to predict, and cause more damage. As the polar regions warm and their ice sheets destabilize, these violent weather events become more commonplace, disrupting daily life for millions of people around the world. The collapse of Antarctic ice is also contributing to an increase in the amount of moisture in the atmosphere, which fuels extreme rainfall events. The polar ice sheets contain a significant portion of the Earth's freshwater, and as these ice masses melt into the ocean, they raise sea levels but also increase the moisture content in the air. This leads to heavier rainfall, particularly in areas that are already prone to extreme weather. Coastal regions, already threatened by rising seas, are seeing not only more flooding due to higher tides but also more intense storms that bring even more water from the atmosphere. This combination of rising seas and intensified rainfall is devastating, increasing the likelihood of flooding in already vulnerable regions and making some areas uninhabitable in the future. At the same time, the shifting ice sheets in Antarctica can also contribute to more severe droughts in certain areas. As the overall climate system shifts due to the loss of ice in the south, some regions experience shifts in precipitation patterns that leave them with less rain and prolonged periods of extreme heat. For instance, areas like the Mediterranean and parts of Africa are becoming more prone to drought conditions as the southern ice sheets lose mass. These dry periods strain water resources, decimate agricultural production, and further exacerbate the global water crisis. And much like the floods, these droughts don't just occur in isolation. They are part of the same global cycle of unpredictability driven by the accelerating changes in Antarctica. By fundamentally altering the balance of heat, moisture, and air currents, the collapse of Antarctica's ice sheets contributes directly to these unpredictable and extreme weather patterns. We can no longer rely on old weather predictions, and as these shifts accelerate, the global community will have to adjust to a new, far more unpredictable climate reality. As we face the unprecedented changes brought on by the collapse of Antarctica's ice sheets, it's clear that the scale of the challenge ahead requires bold and transformative solutions. One potential key to mitigating the devastating effects of rising sea levels and extreme weather patterns lies in the idea of climate engineering, a controversial but increasingly discussed set of methods aimed at directly manipulating Earth's climate systems to reverse or slow down the damage. Among these solutions, one that stands out as both promising and contentious is solar geoengineering, particularly the concept of injecting reflective particles into the stratosphere to block some of the sun's energy from reaching the Earth. The idea behind solar geoengineering is simple. By creating a reflective layer in the stratosphere, much like the cooling effects of volcanic eruptions, we could reduce the amount of sunlight reaching the Earth's surface. This would theoretically lower global temperatures, counteracting some of the warming effects caused by the melting of Antarctica's ice. The benefits are clear. If successful, it could temporarily halt the worst effects of climate change, including the rising seas and the intensifying storms that threaten our coastal communities. This method offers an opportunity to buy time as we work on longer-term solutions like transitioning to renewable energy or reducing greenhouse gas emissions. While it might sound like science fiction, solar geoengineering has gained increasing attention due to its potential to deliver a rapid reduction in global temperatures. The scientific community has been exploring various ways of introducing reflective particles into the atmosphere. Ideas range from spraying aerosols like sulfur dioxide or calcium carbonate into the stratosphere to the use of aircraft or balloons to release these substances at specific altitudes. Some studies suggest that even a modest amount of these particles could produce significant cooling, potentially slowing the current rate of ice sheet loss in Antarctica and giving us more time to adapt to the changing environment. However, this solution is far from straightforward, and there are significant risks involved. First, the effects of solar geoengineering are still largely unknown. While the cooling effect may be beneficial in theory, it may also lead to unintended consequences. For instance, blocking out some of the sun's radiation could disrupt rainfall patterns, potentially exacerbating droughts in already dry areas or altering monsoon cycles that millions of people rely on for agriculture. The technology may also introduce complexities we can't fully predict. Shifting one problem in the climate system could inadvertently trigger new, unforeseen challenges. Moreover, there's the issue of governance and ethics. If solar geoengineering were ever deployed on a global scale, who would have control over it? The potential for unilateral action by one country or a group of nations could provoke geopolitical tensions and conflict, particularly if the climate manipulation disproportionately affects certain regions. For example, a sudden cooling effect could be devastating for countries relying on warm weather for their agriculture or ecosystems. This potential for inequality makes the international regulation of such technologies a monumental challenge. Another important consideration is the termination effect, the possibility that if we stop the geoengineering process abruptly, it could lead to rapid and catastrophic warming. Without the reflective particles, the climate could surge toward extreme temperatures far faster than it would have if geoengineering had never been used, causing more harm than good. It's a kind of climate scalpel that requires incredibly precise control. A mistake could push us further into dangerous territory. Despite these risks, many argue that solar geoengineering may be a necessary tool in our arsenal as we deal with the immediate threat of rising temperatures and their disastrous consequences. With Antarctica's ice melting at an accelerating rate, the clock is ticking. Solar geoengineering could offer a temporary but crucial way to reduce the pressure on ecosystems and societies while giving us the time needed to address the root causes of climate change: greenhouse gas emissions, deforestation, and unsustainable agricultural practices. What we must remember, however, is that this is not a substitute for the real work we need to do in mitigating climate change. It would be a short-term measure that buys us time but should not be viewed as a permanent solution. The focus must remain on cutting emissions, transitioning to cleaner energy sources, and protecting critical ecosystems like those found in the Arctic and Antarctic. Climate engineering, if it proves feasible, should be seen as a backup, a way to slow down the inevitable impacts while humanity works to regain control of its environmental future. Ultimately, the idea of solar geoengineering sparks a conversation about the lengths we may need to go in order to preserve the planet and our way of life. It's a controversial solution to a monumental problem, but as Antarctica's ice sheets continue to collapse and the consequences grow more severe, It's a conversation we can no longer afford to ignore. The possibility of climate engineering may be one of the most significant decisions humanity faces in the coming decades, a decision that will determine not only the future of Antarctica but the future of life on Earth. As we grapple with the accelerating collapse of Antarctica's ice sheets and the rising seas that threaten coastal regions around the world, there is another potential solution that has gained significant attention: carbon capture and storage, CCS. While this technology is not new, its potential to address the root cause of many of our climate problems, excessive greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, has made it one of the most talked about solutions in recent years. By directly removing carbon dioxide from the air and storing it safely underground or in other forms, CCS promises to significantly reduce the amount of greenhouse gases contributing to global warming, which in turn could slow the melting of polar ice and the rise of sea levels. The concept behind CCS is deceptively simple: capture carbon dioxide from industrial processes or the atmosphere, then transport it to storage sites where it can be securely stored for centuries, or even millennia. The process works in 3 steps. First, carbon dioxide is captured at its source, such as power plants, cement factories, or directly from the air through machines known as direct air capture (DAC) units. Once captured, the carbon dioxide is compressed into a liquid form and transported, typically through pipelines, to deep geological formations, like depleted oil and gas fields, or saline aquifers, vast underground reservoirs where the gas can be safely stored away from the atmosphere. The promise of CCS is monumental. If deployed at a large scale, it could remove vast amounts of carbon from the atmosphere, helping to reverse some of the damage caused by decades of fossil fuel use. For Antarctica, this could be a game changer. By reducing the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, we could slow the warming of the planet and, in turn, slow the warming of the Southern Ocean. This would reduce the thermal stress on the ice sheets, ultimately slowing their collapse and the resulting sea level rise. If the technology is deployed on a wide enough scale, it might even help to stabilize the climate system in ways we can only imagine today. What makes CCS particularly exciting is that it could be implemented alongside other solutions, like transitioning to renewable energy sources or reforestation, allowing us to tackle the problem of climate change from multiple angles. For example, while renewable energy focuses on eliminating new emissions, CCS could work to clean up the pollution already in the atmosphere. This two-pronged approach would be especially important as we work to prevent the complete disintegration of Antarctica's ice, buying time for adaptation and mitigation strategies to take root. However, there are substantial challenges to overcome before CCS can be deployed on a large scale. First and foremost is the cost. The technology is expensive, and current methods of carbon capture are not yet efficient enough to handle the massive amounts of carbon needed to make a meaningful impact on global temperatures. Capturing carbon at a large scale requires extensive infrastructure, including carbon capture facilities and transportation pipelines, all of which come with a hefty price tag. To make matters more complicated, the storage sites must be carefully monitored to ensure that the carbon dioxide remains securely contained. Any leaks from underground storage sites could result in the release of the very carbon we're trying to capture, rendering the whole process ineffective. Moreover, the energy required to capture and store carbon is not insignificant. In many cases, the process of capturing and compressing carbon dioxide uses a large amount of energy, often derived from fossil fuels, which somewhat diminishes the net impact of the technology. For CCS to truly be effective, we would need to ensure that the energy used for these operations comes from renewable sources, or else we risk merely shifting emissions from one sector to another without making any real progress. Public acceptance is another hurdle. Communities and governments would need to be convinced that the long-term storage of carbon dioxide underground is safe and effective. There are concerns about the potential for leaks or other unforeseen consequences that could emerge from storing billions of tons of carbon deep beneath the Earth's surface. While the science behind CCS is sound, the large-scale implementation of the technology remains a major unknown, and people are understandably cautious about introducing such a disruptive solution. Even with these challenges, the potential for CCS to combat the rapid melting of Antarctica's ice sheets is undeniable. By reducing the greenhouse gases driving global warming, CCS could be a key piece in the puzzle of how we prevent the catastrophic effects of climate change. What we must do now is invest in scaling up this technology, by improving efficiency, lowering costs, and ensuring that the long-term storage of carbon is safe and effective. If we can overcome these obstacles, carbon capture and storage could become one of the most powerful tools in our fight to protect Antarctica, its ice, and the millions of people living along our coastlines from the devastating effects of climate change. As we reflect on the immense challenges posed by the shifting of Antarctica's ice sheets and the alarming consequences it could have on our planet, one truth becomes clear: the stakes have never been higher. From the threat of rising sea levels that will inundate coastal cities, to the disruption of marine ecosystems, agriculture, and freshwater resources, the impact of Antarctica's changing landscape will touch every corner of the Earth. As the Antarctic ice sheets disintegrate under the pressure of an increasingly unstable climate, we are facing a world on the edge of profound transformation. The potential for catastrophic flooding, a destabilized climate, and disruptions to food and water supplies is a reality we cannot ignore. Yet, amidst this urgency, there is hope. We've explored a range of potential solutions, each with its own set of challenges and rewards, offering us a glimpse of what could be possible if we take bold, decisive action. Whether through innovative technologies like carbon capture and storage (CCS), which holds the potential to address the very heart of the issue by reducing the atmospheric concentration of greenhouse gases, or through more traditional approaches like renewable energy and reforestation, it is clear that solutions exist. The road ahead may be steep, but it is not insurmountable. Carbon capture, for example, presents a fascinating opportunity to directly address the root cause of the problem: excess carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. If we can harness this technology at scale, we could begin to reverse the damage already done, slow the melting of the ice sheets, and stabilize our climate. While there are hurdles, cost, energy use, and public acceptance, the promise of CCS remains undeniable. It's not just about slowing Antarctica's ice sheet collapse, it's about protecting the future of millions of people who depend on our oceans, ecosystems, and resources. The need to shift our collective focus to the most effective and scalable solutions has never been more urgent. In tandem with technological advancements, there are other critical strategies, such as shifting to renewable energy, reducing emissions, and strengthening international cooperation, that will also play an indispensable role in mitigating the effects of climate change. These efforts, when combined with the knowledge of how Antarctica's ice is changing, can drive a new era of innovation and cooperation. We must focus not only on preventing further damage, but also on adapting to the challenges we already face. Whether it's rebuilding coastal infrastructures to withstand rising seas, investing in water conservation systems, or developing new forms of agriculture suited to shifting climate conditions, we must act decisively and urgently. The complexity of this issue means that there is no single solution that will save us from the rising tide. It will require a multifaceted global effort. But through science, innovation, and collaboration, we still have time to change the course of our future. Every effort counts, whether it's supporting new research, implementing policies that protect vulnerable ecosystems, or simply making more sustainable choices in our daily lives. The responsibility to safeguard our planet's future lies not only in the hands of governments and scientists, but in the choices we all make. So, as we close this chapter on the potential collapse of Antarctica's ice sheets, let us remember that the future is not set in stone. We can still turn the tide if we choose to act now. Each step we take, each technology we develop, each policy we adopt, and each person we inspire to join the fight against climate change, brings us closer to a world where the devastating consequences of a warming planet can be mitigated. Together, we have the power to protect not only Antarctica's icy expanse but also the future of our shared home. If you found this video insightful and are committed to learning more about the pressing issues that affect our planet, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Stay with us on this journey as we explore the challenges, solutions, and critical decisions that lie ahead. Your support makes a difference, and together, we can continue to raise awareness and drive action in the face of our changing world. Thank you for being a part of this conversation, and remember, the future of our planet is in our hands.